of the ninth chapter. Anybody? Rakesh Prabhu, Subbu Prabhu, Sushil Prabhu? No? What happened? Everybody is silent.
Not silent, Prabhu.
Whatever.
Prabhu, the
What was the key aspect? What was the key topic of the ninth chapter?
key topic was how Bhishma Dev left his body in the presence of Krishna.
Correct.
That was one. And the second was he gave certain important learnings to Yudhishthir, how
Correct.
to rule the kingdom, what are the various varnashram and other dharms, and all those how those things are to be passed. And finally, some 8 or 9 verses are only after he left his body, how those things were, how everybody was showing their respects to Bhishma. These were the key things which I understood from this.
Okay. So, um, if you take one key lesson out of that chapter, what would it be? The key, I would say the most important lesson.
So everybody, after learning this Gita and all these things, I have this is now realized कि getting while dying, if we have a darshan of Krishna or we remember Krishna, we are able to reach to his Godhead. And this aim was achieved by Bhishma in very easy way. Krishna was not only in his mind, but he was standing just before him before leaving his body. So according to
Exactly.
me, this was the
Perfect, perfect. And if we take that, take this point, extend it, how is it possible that one can remember Krishna at the time of death?
it is only by a constant exercise, that is the abhyas, that if you keep on chanting, if you keep on attending, if you keep on having a devotees association, it may be possible that at that time you may remember, keep his memory.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, to be able to spend the whole life uh, by enjoying material benefits and then expecting to remember Krishna at the time of death, it is not at all possible, right? So, we'll just quickly look at the conclusion that is given in Bhagavad Gita. Anybody remembers which chapter in Bhagavad Gita talks about passing away at the time of or remembering Krishna at the time of death?
So it may be seventh or ninth.
Anyone else? What happened today? Rakesh Prabhu, Subbu, Rao Prabhu, nobody's talking. Don't remember.
It is 8.5.
Yeah, Rakesh Prabhu, you remember which was that chapter, which is that verse which talks about it?
Sorry, what is that, sir?
Now I'm asking the key lesson that we get from the ninth chapter is Bhishma was able to see and remember Krishna at the time of death. Yeah, that is the key aspect. And one should work or one should basically devote himself and do bhakti throughout the life. Only then it is possible to remember him. And this
Yes.
aspect has been taught in one of the chapters in Bhagavad Gita. Anybody remembers which it is?
Chapter 8, right?
Sorry, yeah, it's chapter 8. And within that, Arjun asks one question in 8.2.
Prayana Kale. Yeah,
Prayana Kale Chapiman.
yeah.
Yeah,
So he asked, how should one remember you? And a person who is devoted to you at the time of death, how does he realize you? And then
correct.
he says, how a person should keep worshipping me and thinking about me all through his life. And I assure you that a person, when he leaves the body, if he is thinking about me, then he comes back to me.
Exactly, exactly. And he extends that to say that whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone, very important, alone, at once attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. So he is telling what happens when one remembers Krishna. And in the next verse, says what happens when one remembers something other than Krishna. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So, and the Srimad Bhagavatam expands this principle by talking about the story of Bharat Maharaj, Jada Bharat, in case you know him by that name. So Bharat Maharaj was a son of Rishabdev. Rishabdev was an incarnation of Vishnu. Rishabdev is also one of the foremost Tirthankars of Jain religion. So Rishabdev's son Bharat Maharaj he was an excellent king, and after a certain time he gives up his householder life and goes to forest and stays over there, and then he devotes himself completely to the worship of Vishnu. At a certain point of time, he comes in contact with one small deer. There is a big story, I'm not elaborating it to detail. And then he becomes attached to that deer. And one day that deer goes away into the forest. And he is so attached that he is constantly thinking about the deer. And then when he gives up the body also, he is thinking about the deer. And that's why he becomes a deer in the next life. And because he has done a lot of bhakti, he is still able to remember his previous life. And once he gives up that deer body, then he takes up another human body, and he is still remembering what he has done previously. Then he realizes his mistake of not remembering Vishnu at the time of death. And then he spends his whole life in such a manner that he is completely detached. And there is a big discourse between one king named as Rahugana and Jadabharat. And Jadabharat is giving philosophical discourse to King Rahugana. And then Rahugana understands, he becomes his disciple, and the discourse continues. So this is practically proven in Srimad Bhagavatam also. And the key point that we need to take from the 9th chapter is, if you want Krishna if you want to be able to remember Krishna at the time of death, then it cannot happen that throughout the life we enjoy materially and at the last moment Krishna ka dhyan karenge. वैसा नहीं होता है. I may have told this to you all before. At the end of life, during the time of death, the pain that a body undergoes, which is written in Garud Puran, the pain that a body undergoes is equivalent to a scorpion, 40,000 scorpions biting the body at the same time. So we cannot tolerate a normal ant biting us, a normal mosquito bite us. Imagine a scorpion biting and imagine 40,000 scorpions biting at the same time. वो क्या कहते हैं ना हिंदी में, नानी याद आ जाती है, तो वैसा हो जाएगा. तो इमेजिन करो, then with 40,000 scorpions biting at the same time, will you be able to remember Krishna if you have not practiced throughout the life? Hare Krishna. So now we are coming into the 10th chapter now. We will read this. This chapter, what we need to understand is how the Dwarka Vasis loved Krishna, how they were eager to see Krishna, how they were, waiting for Krishna for so long. How did Krishna reciprocate with them? Yeah, because Krishna, a very important point to understand is, when we worship the Lord actually has a personal relationship with us. Okay, which verse in Bhagavad Gita confirms this? Anybody? Nobody? The reciprocation verse. Anybody
It
remember?
says, as one surrenders and prays to me, I reciprocate in the same manner.
Fantastic. 11 verse. Thank you so much, bro. Wonderful. As all surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pruta. This is a verse which confirms reciprocation uh, by Krishna. And this also confirms a personal relationship that Krishna has with all of us. Okay. Now, remote, this this chapter actually tells us about how Krishna interacted with each and everybody in Dwarka, and he maintained a personal relationship with all of them. So this is one thing we learn from it. This particular chapter, it contains a particular verse number 16. We will not be covering that today, but it contains this verse. When you read the purport of this verse, you will understand the depth and the beauty of Srila Prabhupada's purports. So I'll not divulge too much about it. We will take it in the next class. But seemingly, obvious verses which has an obvious meaning, how Prabhupada used to go into the depth of those verses and give the crux to us in his purports, you will understand the beauty of such a purport. That's 110:16. So we will read it when we come to it. That purport is my personal favorite. That actually highlights the depth of knowledge that Prabhupada had. So let's read verse number 1. Any question from the 9th chapter or any other question? In case you have, you can raise your hand. I'll proceed now. Shaunaka uvacha hatva svariktha sprudha atataino yudhishthiro dharma bhrutam varishtha sahanujai pratyavaruddha bhojanah katham pravruttah kim karashi tattah. Anybody? Hare Krishna. Who's reading?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I can read.
Yeah.
Maharaja Yudhishthir was the greatest of all men of religion.
We'll read
Thus
the
he was-
translation first, please.
Oh, sorry. Hare Krishna. Shaunaka Muni asked, after killing his enemies who desired to usurp his rightful inheritance, how did the greatest of all religious men, Maharaja Yudhishthir, assisted by his brothers, rule his subjects? Surely he could not freely enjoy his kingdom with unrestricted consciousness. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Purport. Maharaja Yudhishthira was the greatest of all men of religion. Thus, he was not at all inclined to fight with his cousins for the sake of enjoying the kingdom. He fought for the right cause because the kingdom of Hastinapur was his rightful inheritance, and his cousins wanted to usurp it for themselves. He fought, therefore, for the right cause under the guidance of Lord Sri Krishna, but he could not enjoy the results of his victory because his cousins were all killed in the fight. He therefore ruled over the kingdom as a matter of duty, assisted by his younger brothers. The enquiry was important for Shaunaka Rishi, who wanted to know about the behavior of Maharaja Yudhishthir when he was at ease to enjoy the kingdom. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai. Thank you. So, the beauty of our Puran, and for that matter, all our scriptures, is it encourages a dialogue. What that means is, let's look at it from a very fundamental level, that perspective. So the Lord wants all of us to come back to him, and he wants all of us to love him, and voluntarily. Now voluntary means you are given a choice whether you want to love him or you do not want to love him. There is no compulsion on you. But the Lord also aids us by giving the necessary knowledge why we should love Him and why we should not love something else. And this means that He tells you the positives of loving Him and He tells the negatives of not loving Him. And then uh, the decision is can be taken by Him. He does not leave us in a no man's land and says that voluntarily you have to come back home without telling us which route leads to home. So he doesn't do that. And that is precisely the reason why these Puranas, Itihasas, Mahabharata, and Bhagavad Gita and all are there to guide us on the path. Now, what happens is while walking on the path, you may have a lot of questions. You may have question about why am I supposed to love him? What if I love something else? What if I temporarily want to love something else and forget Krishna for some moment? We want to learn about the other people also who have loved him previously or who have not loved him previously. All these actually constitute as a component of our knowledge based on which we can take a decision to love or not to love. Now, during this discourse, you will have questions, and these questions need answers. Once these answers are given, when your conviction is developed, then only you will be able to take the right decision. Otherwise, if you are forced to take up a decision that irrespective of your knowledge and irrespective of your choice, you are forced to love him, then that wouldn't be voluntary. And then there is a chance of a fall down again. And to avoid that repeated fall down, he is ensuring that we are completely equipped, even with a zero probability of falling down, completely equipped to go back to him and never come back again. And during this discourse, all your doubts should get cleared. That's why all our spiritual scriptures, they encourage a dialogue. And if you remember in the second or third chapter of this canto of Bhagavatam, Suta Goswami appreciates Shaunak Rishi because he is asking very good questions.
Prabhuji, we can't hear you. Prabhuji, we can't hear you.
No, Prabhuji. It was clear to me.
Is it, Subbu?
Or maybe from
No,
my
no.
side. Sorry.
I think Subbu's this thing has a problem. We can hear you.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Okay. So, when Shaunak Rishi asked this question, Suta Goswami said that because all these questions relate to Krishna, all these questions are wonderful and I will answer them. Now, that was an encouragement given by Suta Goswami to Shaunak Rishi to ask more and more questions. Why? Because they relate to Krishna. This Bhagavatam that we are studying has two meanings. The person as a Bhagavat and the book Bhagavatam. Okay, so the book Bhagavatam, which is mentioned in the 40th verse of third chapter, that it is the incarnation of the Lord himself, that it is a literary incarnation. Let me just open that verse. So the question asked by Shaunak Rishi was, after Krishna departed, who will guide the normal living beings? So Shuddha Goswami says this Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. So this book Bhagavatam has its own, studying it has its own benefits. But there is another benefit of studying this one, that is that we are studying about the devotees of the Lord also. So Bhagavat is somebody who is a devotee of Bhagavan. And Bhagavatam talks about Bhagavatas also. That's why we saw Narad Muni was described in chapter 4 and 5. Vyas Rishi was described. Then Kunti Maharani was described. Then Arjun, Draupadi were described. Bhishmadev was described. And a little later, Parikshit Maharaj will also be described. Then Shukadev Goswami will be described. And then, various people will be described. Now, Shaunak Rishi. Shaunak Rishi, anybody knows who he is? Who is Shaunak Rishi?
The head of the sages?
Yeah, the head of the 88,000 sages who had assembled to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from Suta Goswami. Thank you. Okay, so now he wants to know how did Yudhishthir rule, how did the kingdom and the people. That Suta Goswami describes in a brief manner. So let's study that now. Suta Uvacha Vamsham Kuror Vamshadavagni Nirhrutam Samrohaitva Bhavano Harihi Niveshayitva Nijrajya Ishvaro Yudhishthiram Pritamana Babhuvaha. Translation and purport. Who's reading? Hare Krishna.
Sut Goswami said, Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, who is the maintainer of this, who is the maintainer of the world, became pleased after re-establishing Maharaja Yudhishthir in his own kingdom and after restoring the Kuru dynasty, which had been exhausted by the bamboo fire of anger. The word is compared to a forest fire caused by the cohesion of bamboo bushes. Such a forest fire takes place automatically, for bamboo cohesion occurs without external cause. Similarly, in the material world, the wrath of those who want to lord it over material nature interacts, and the fire of war takes place, exhausting the unwanted population. Such fires or wars takes place and the Lord has nothing to do with them. But because he wants to maintain the creation, he desires the mass of people to follow the right path of self-realization, which enables the living beings to enter into the kingdom of God. The Lord wants the suffering human beings to come back home, back to him, and cease to suffer the threefold material pangs. The whole plan of creation is made in this way, and one who does not come in on his senses suffers in the material world by pangs inflicted by the illusory energy of the Lord. The Lord therefore wants his bona fide representative to rule the world. Lord Shri Krishna descended to establish this sort of regime and to kill the unwanted persons who have nothing to do with his plan. The battle of Kurukshetra was fought according to the plan of the Lord, so that undesirable persons could get out of the world, and a peaceful kingdom under his devotee could be established. The Lord was therefore fully satisfied when King Yudhishthir was on the throne, and the seedling of the dynasty of Kuru in the person of Maharaj Parikshit was saved.
Jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. So here we understand that the Lord, before he advented onto this world, at that time itself, he had a purpose to come in here. And we spoke about this, right? In Garga Samhita, it is mentioned how Prithvi Mata, in the form of a cow, went to Brahma and asked him to get rid of the sinful kings on this earth. And she was feeling a lot of burden on herself to carry these sinful kings. So Brahma said, I cannot do anything. The Lord has to do. That's why they go up to Shirodakshai Vishnu. And Shirodakshai Vishnu said, this time I cannot come. I will not come. This time Krishna himself will come. And then they, along with various demigods and Kshirodakshai, Vishnu and Brahma, they all go to Krishna and they invite him to come over there. So this whole journey is also described nicely in Garga Samhita. One key point that I remember is, you must have seen this anjeer, right? Fig. When you open a fig, the not the dry one, but when you open the ripe fig, uh, you see the seeds of the fig so small and so many of them, right? So Brahma describes that outside Brahmanda, he was able to see all these universes like small seeds in a fig. So there are so many Brahmandas. When they go up, they request Krishna, and then Krishna agrees, okay, I will come and I will resolve your problem. So this duty, or I would say this cause of his advent, was already decided what he is going to do. Now, after having achieved each and every objective, that's why Krishna expressed satisfaction for completing his objective. It also provides satisfaction that now he will have a reason to depart this world also, which uh, which will be talked about in the next one or two chapters also. Now, one point is, it says from bamboo cohesion, a fire occurs without external cause. This external cause is referred to a human being going into a jungle and lighting a fire. It doesn't happen, right? We don't go and do it. But still a fire occurs. That is because the bushes of the trees, they touch each other, friction is caused, and with the help of air, the fire is generated. So there is no external cause from a human manual perspective, but the uh, external cause is the nature itself, uh, which is causing the fire. Similar to when we perform the karma and we get the results, Krishna says, right, it is the Prakriti who is giving the results to you. But sometimes we don't understand it and we blame the other person who causes this to us. But it is actually the Prakriti who is delivering our results to us. Anybody knows what are these threefold material pangs?
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, somebody else, if they can answer, other than you or Rakesh Prabhu. Anybody? Subhu Prabhu, you know, Uday Prabhu?
No, yaar.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Adi
Adi
Devik,
Prabhu.
Adi Bhautik, Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yeah, correct. So what is the first one?
Adi
Adhyat,
Dev,
Adhyat,
Adhyat.
Adhyatmik, then Adi Bhautik, and then Adi Daivik. So the pain or whatever it is, the events that are caused in our life because of our own body and our own mind, they are Adhyatmik. Then the events that are caused because of other living entities, it could be our family, our friends, our society, relatives, uh, even a non-living thing like a car or animal, whatever it is, all these constitute under adi bhautik, and adi daivik are the natural disturbances caused by the demigods, who are the administrative meaning they are the owners of the administrative affairs. Now, what is being highlighted here is, so these material pains that we undergo, they are actually our results of our karma. So sometimes what happens is the karma has not ripened to the extent that they should be given immediate punishment. Sometimes the karma of many people together comes and it causes a big event. Like, for example, a drought happening in some city or some village. Now, when this happens, many people at the same time are given the punishment. Or when a flight transporting 300, 400, 500 people, it crashes into a sea or anywhere, then all these 300, 400 people die. So the karma of all of them was bound together, or for that matter, they were supposed to get the result of the karma together, and that's why they have got it. So when a huge number of people conduct, sinful activities, and they need to be punished in a mass scale. That's why these wars and all something like this happens, so that the Lord gets an opportunity to give punishment to all of them at the very same time. And why is it necessary? It is because if such sinful people continue to preside on earth, there is a good chance that dharma will get vanished. And when that happens, the other people who are pious and who behave well, they will also be misguided and they will also walk on the wrong path. But when a majority of the population is on the wrong path, barring a few handful people who are on the right path, then only the avatar happens. Lord comes down, descends as some avatar, and he either eradicates such people or he teaches such people, depending on what his original intention was. So when he comes down as Parshuram or Krishna or Ram or Narsimha, his objective is basically to kill the demons and protect the pious. But when he comes down as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then he does not kill anybody. He only teaches them so that they can love him, give up their sinful activities and love him. So let's move on. निशम्य भीष्मोक्तम् अथाच्युतोक्तम् प्रवृत्त विज्ञान विधूत विभ्रमः शशासगामिन्द्र इवाजिताश्रयः परिद्यूपान्तां मनु जानुवर्तितः. Translation and purport.
Yeah, I'll read Prabhuji. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai
Translation. Maharaja Yudhishthira, after being enlightened by what was spoken by Bhishma Deva and Lord Sri Krishna, the infallible engaged himself in matters of perfect knowledge because all his misgivings were eradicated. Thus, he ruled over the earth and seas and was followed by his young brothers. Purport. The modern English law of primogeniture or the law of inheritance by the firstborn was also prevalent in those days when Maharaja Yudhishthira ruled the earth and seas. In those days, the king of Astinapura, now part of New Delhi, was the emperor of the world, including the seas up to the time of Maharaja Parikshit, the grandson of Maharaja Yudhishthira. Maharaja Yudhishthira younger brothers were acting as his ministers and commanders of state, and there was full cooperation between the perfectly religious brothers of the king. Maharaja Yudhishthira was the ideal king or representative of Lord Krishna, Lord Sri Krishna, to rule over the kingdom of earth and was comparable to King Indra, the representative ruler of the heavenly planets. The, the demigods like Indra, Chandra, Surya, Varna, and Vayu are the representative kings of different planets of the universe. And similarly, Maharaja Yudhishthira was also one of them, ruling over the kingdom of the earth. Maharaja Yudhishthira was not a typically unenlightened political leader of modern democracy. Maharaja Yudhishthira was instructed by Bhishma Deva and the infallible Lord also, and therefore he had full knowledge of everything in perfection. The modern elected executive head of a state is just like a puppet because he has no kingly power. Even if he is enlightened like Maharaja Yudhishthira, he cannot do anything out of his own good will due to his constitutional position. Therefore, there are so many states over the earth quarreling because of ideological differences or other selfish motives. But a king like Maharaja Yudhishthira had no ideology of his own. He had but to follow the instructions of the infallible Lord and the Lord's representative and the authorized agent Bhishma Deva. It is instructed in the Shastras that one should follow the great authority and the infallible Lord without any personal motive and manufactured ideology. Therefore, it was possible for Maharaja Yudhishthira to rule the whole world, including the seas, because the principles were infallible and universally applicable to everyone. The conception of one world state can only be fulfilled if we can follow the infallible authority. An imperfect human being cannot create an ideology acceptable to everyone. Only the perfect and the infallible can create a program which is applicable to every place and can be followed by all in the world. It is a person who rules and not the impersonal government. If the person is perfect, the government is perfect. If the person is a fool, the government is fool's paradise. That is the law of nature. There are so many stories of imperfect kings or executive heads. Therefore, the executive head must be trained person like Maharaja Yudhishthira, and he must have the full autocratic power to rule over the world. The conception of a world state can take shape only under the regime of a perfect king like Maharaja Yudhishthira. The world was happy in those days because there were kings like Maharaja Yudhishthira to rule over the world. Jai
Jack,
Shri Ram.
thank you. So quite a lot of clarity already there in the purport. So people have today a lot of problem with certain verses of Manu Samhita, especially the leftists and all that. You might see on Twitter and similar stuff. They are completely against Manu Samhita. There have been even demonstrations and even people have burnt the copies of Manu Samhita. But what they fail to understand is this law has been given by the Supreme Lord Himself, who Himself is all perfect. So, a kind of a, when one starts on the spiritual path, the first thing one should know is about basically the person whom he is supposed to worship. And once one understands that person, then it becomes simple to accept the teachings of that person. And that is why Bhagavad Gita is considered as the first book in spiritual life. So when we understand who Krishna is, when we understand that he is the Supreme Lord, he is the all perfect, he knows anything and everything, yeah, then then it becomes simple for us to accept whatever he has given. And part of that, whatever he has given is Manu Samhita also, which talks about how a man should lead his life in terms of laws, rules, do's, don'ts, and all that. So, in that, also, this law of inheritance and everything is mentioned over there. And Prabhupada specifically highlights that when these laws are prepared by imperfect people, you cannot expect a perfect outcome. And for that matter, we see that as well today. When these laws are made, there are a lot of loopholes. There are a lot of people who remain unsatisfied with these laws also. And finally, they create dissatisfaction, because of which they need to come up with amendment after amendment after amendment. But once
Your
one
voice is not heard, Sachin, Prabhuji.
um, is everybody not able to hear me?
I am able to hear you.
Yeah.
We can hear you as well.
No, Prabhu, we can hear.
Acha.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Okay, fine. Okay. So I forgot what I was saying. So when these laws are made by the Lord, okay, there is absolutely no reason to doubt about the intention of the Lord and the accuracy of the law. So because of these, Prabhupada is highlighting specifically here that when you have an imperfect person preparing a law, you cannot expect a perfect outcome of this one. And because of this, there is always certain section of people who remain dissatisfied, and then the quarrels start happening. Why? Because the Lord has given these laws long time back, and the way we come up with version after version in softwares, or amendment after amendment in the judiciary or the legal system, there is never a need for the Lord to come up with a new version. Oh, because times have changed, or because so and so scenario was not understood properly or was not considered, that's why this is the latest edition of the book and this is the latest law. Please ignore the version 1.0, now version 2.0 is the latest one. These things do not happen with our scriptures. Why? Because perfect people are prescribing this law. And they are not just perfect, they are Trikaladnya also. Trikaladnya meaning they know the past, present, and future. And we will see when in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the third chapter, symptoms of Kali Yuga are mentioned. So Shukadev Goswami talks about what is going to happen in Kali Yuga 5000 years back, and his prophecies are actually coming true right now, and we can see that. So that is not possible just because he is some kind of astrologer, but he is because he is a devotee of the Lord, and the Lord is guiding him from inside, and because of which he is speaking. And precisely that is the reason why whatever these people speak, the devotees of the Lord, that turns out to be true, and that the Lord ensures that it becomes true. So that's why uh, we should go by the laws created by the Lord. And okay, we cannot avoid it, or we cannot ignore the governmental laws, but still wherever possible, the Lord's laws should be followed by ignoring the government's laws. Not that if the Lord hasn't stated that drive in a particular manner without creating an accident, we should ignore the government's law. Not that way, but the point is, especially when it comes to leading a religious life and a spiritual life, the Lord's laws have to be obeyed. Any question around this one? Can we move on? No. Okay. कामं ववर्षपर्जन्यः सर्वकामदुघामहि शिशिचुः स्म व्रजान् गावः पयसोधस्वतीर्मुदा.
I'll read.
Yeah.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Hey, Srila Prabhupada. During the regime of Maharaj Yudhishthira, the cloud showered all the water that people needed, and the earth produced all the necessities of man in profusion. Due to its fatty milk bag and cheerful attitude, the cows used to moisten the gazing ground with milk. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
The basic principle of economic development is centered on land and cows. The necessities of human society are food, grains, fruits, milk, mineral, clothing, wood, etc. One requires all these items to fulfill the material needs of body. Certainly, one does not require flesh and fish or iron tools and machinery. During the regime of Maharaja Yudhishthira, all over the world there were regulated rainfalls. Rainfalls are not in the control of human being. The heavenly king Indradev is the controller of rains, and he is the servant of the Lord. When the Lord is obeyed by the king and the people under the king's administration, there are regulated rains from the horizon. And these rains are the cause of all varieties of production on the land. Not only do regulated rains help ample production of grains and fruits, but when they combine with astronomical influences, there is ample production of valuable stones and pearls. Grains and vegetables are s- some sumptuously feed a man and animal, and a fatty cow delivers enough milk to supply a man some sumptuous sumptuously with vigor and vitality. If there is enough milk, enough grains, enough fruits, enough cotton, enough silk, and enough jewels, then why do the people need cinemas, houses, and prostitution, slaughterhouses, etc.? What is the need of an artificial, luxurious life of cinema, cars, radio, flesh, and hotels? Has this civilization produced anything but quarreling individually and nationally? Has this civilization enhanced the cause of equality and fraternity by sending thousands of men into the factory and the war fields at the whims of a particular man? It is said here that the cows used to moisten the pasturing land with milk because their milk bags were fatty and the animals were joyful. Do they not require, therefore, proper protection for a joyful life by being fed with a sufficient quantity of grass in the field? Why should men kill cows for their selfish purposes? Why should man not be satisfied with grains, fruits, and milk, which combined together can produce hundreds and thousands of palatable dishes? Why are these slaughterhouses all over the world to kill innocent animals? Maharaja Parikshit, grandson of Maharaja Yudhishthira, while touring his vast kingdom, saw a black man attempting to kill a cow. The king at once arrested the butcher and chastised him sufficiently. Should not a king or executive head protect the lives of the poor animals who are unable to defend themselves? Is this humanity? Are not the animals of a country citizens also? Then why are they allowed to be butchered in organized slaughterhouses? Are these the signs of equality, fraternity, or non-violence? Therefore, in contrast with the modern advanced civilized form of government, and an autocracy like Maharaja Yudhishthira is by far superior to a so-called democracy in which animals are killed and a man less than an animal is allowed to cast vote for another less than animal man. We are all creatures of material nature. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord himself is the seed giving father, and material nature is the mother of all living beings in all shapes. Thus, Mother Material Nature has enough foodstuff both for animals and for men. By the grace of the Father Almighty, Sri Krishna, the human being is the elder brother of all other living beings. He is endowed with intelligence more powerful than animals for realizing the course of nature and the indication of the Almighty Father. Human civilizations should depend on the production of material nature without artificially attempting economic development to turn the world into a chaos of artificial greed and power, only for the purpose of artificial luxuries and sense gratification. This is but the life of dogs and hogs. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
सर आप म्यूट पे हैं.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize. I was saying that some of these purports that Prabhupada has written, they narrate a brutal reality. Sometimes it may be a bit difficult to digest, especially when we are new to Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, but that is the reality. This one talks about at a logical level why killing animals for your own sense gratificatory purposes is incorrect. If the animals are in the state, they are also the citizens of the state. So the government carries a responsibility of protecting them as well. You see, recently there was one lioness or lion, I don't remember. There was some name also to that lion. There was some problem that happened. I just don't recollect exactly, but that lioness was about to die or something like that, and there was a big hue and cry around the world. Oh, save that lion, and this, that, and all that. A lot of organizations came forward and all that. There was one elephant in Kerala who was fed firecrackers under the pretext of some bananas or some coconut or something like that, and that those crackers burst inside the stomach of that elephant, and that elephant died. And then again there was a hue and cry in India that this has happened and all that. So while it is very good to actually raise voices against such kind of activities, but why is it applicable only for lions and elephants and tigers and cheetahs and leopards? Why is a cow's life or a chicken's life or a lamb's life less important than a lion's life? Why is it that we feel pained only when we see the death of a lion? And why not for hundreds and thousands and 10,000s of chickens that are killed every day for the satisfaction of somebody's tongue? So, this is definitely hypocrisy, that because I don't care about somebody's life, I will eat it. And because this lion looks very nice, and when he is in the jungle, I can get to see him. I can get to see how he kills other animals, and I can generate some entertainment. That's why that animal's life is important. Whereas chickens and dogs and cows and all that are lying around everywhere in the world, doesn't matter if hundreds and thousands of them die as well. So this is that incorrect approach that we have. This particular purport is a kind of a summary, a very very brief summary with what is described in the 11th canto. So the 11th canto, let me just go back a little bit. So this 10th chapter talks about how Lord Krishna enters Dwarka. Okay, now if you remember, Prabhupada had mentioned in the first chapter that Bhagavatam should not be understood by trying to understand the events chronologically. It is not necessary that sequence number 2 has happened after sequence number 1, or event number 2 happened after event number 1. It could have happened in any order. Based on the context, certain events are described. So now here you see in 10th chapter, Lord Krishna enters Dwarka, and after a while he departs for his planet. But this description has come in the 10th canto. So 9 cantos have elapsed, and in the 10th canto this is spoken. And in the 11th canto, there are two primary topics that are discussed. One is the Nava Yogendra, they give answers to the 9 questions. Nava Yogendra is 9 yogis, okay, who approach King Nimi, and the King Nimi asks one question each to all of these 9 yogis, and they give answers. After that, Uddhav Gita comes in. So Krishna talks in at length on various topics to Uddhav, and that is Uddhav Gita of around 300-400 pages are there in the 11th canto. And after that he departs. So you will see chronology doesn't exist here in Bhagavatam. So this particular topic is around related to Varnashram Dharma, which is spoken by Krishna to Uddhav in 11th canto, and partially Narad Muni talks to Yudhishthir Maharaj in the 9th canto also about Varnashram Dharma. Almost 200-300 pages he talks about it. So Varnashram Dharma has been spoken in detail, and this is just a kind of a small extract out of it. But the main principle that revolves around Varnashram Dharma is what Prabhupada writes here, that complete economic development can be centered around land and cows only. You do not need anything else. All that we have today in terms of factories and all that are unnecessary stuff. And we can actually lead a very simple, pious, and spiritual oriented life using just these two things which are provided by the nature itself, land and cows. But we want more and more. We are unsatisfied with what we have. That's why we go ahead with factories and various other stuff, which later become our own cause of dissatisfaction. It talks about regulated rainfalls. Anybody remembers where in Bhagavad Gita rainfall has been talked about?
During the war,
Chapter 4, right?
No, I didn't get you. Sorry.
Where in chapter 4, where he says yagna has to be done, and he says the demigods will shower you with what is needed, and then he goes on to say that all the food grains are produced because of rainfall. Rainfall is because of yagnas.
Correct. That is there in the third chapter. Yeah. So, annat bhavanti bhutani parjanyat anna sambhavah yajnat bhavati parjamyo yajna karma samudbhava. All living bodies subsist on food grains. So we living animals, we living beings, we need food grains. Food grains are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, sacrifice. And yajna is born of prescribed duties. So when one performs his prescribed duties without bothering about the results, he is actually performing a sacrifice. That sacrifice helps produce grains, rains produce grains, and grains are utilized by people like us. And this is also in a similar manner. The regulated rainfalls, the word regulated is important because if you do not deserve, there will be no rainfall in the area that you live. So that's why to think that rains happen normally just when the sea water is evaporated, they form clouds and clouds fall, rains happen. That is not appropriate because the rains are controlled by somebody. That's why in some places it happens and in some places it doesn't rain. Okay, let's move on. I'm going a bit slow today. Okay. Nadyah samudra girayah savanspati virudhah falantyoshadhaya sarvaha kamamanvrutu tasya vai. Translation?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, can I read?
Yes, please, ma'am.
Translation and purport by Prabhuji Jai Shri.
Jai Shri Prabhupada.
The rivers, oceans, hills, mountains, forests, creepers, and active drugs in every season paid their tax quota to the king in profusion. Purport. Since Maharaj Yudhishthir was under the protection of the Ajita, the infallible Lord, as above mentioned, the properties of the Lord, namely the rivers, oceans, hills, forests, etc., were all pleased, and they used to supply their respective quota of taxes to the king. The secret of success is to take refuge under the protection of the Supreme Lord. Without his sanction, nothing can be possible. To make economic development by our own endeavors on the strength of tools and machinery is not all. The sanction of the Supreme Lord must be there. Otherwise, despite all instrumental arrangements, everything will be unsuccessful. The ultimate cause of success is the Daiv, the Supreme. Kings like Maharaja Yudhishthir knew perfectly well that the king is the agent of the Supreme Lord to look after the welfare of the mass of people. Actually, the state belongs to the Supreme Lord. The rivers, oceans, forests, hills, drugs, etc., are not creations of man. They are all creation of the Supreme Lord, and the living beings is allowed to make use of the property of the Lord for the service of the Lord. Today's slogan is that everything is for the people and therefore the government is for the people and by the people. But to produce a new species of humanity at the present moment on the basis of God consciousness and perfection of human life, the ideology of godly communism, the world has to again follow in the footsteps of king like Maharaja Yudhishthir or Parikshit. There is enough of everything by the will of the Lord, and we can make proper use of things to live comfortably without enmity between man and man, or man and animal, or man and nature. The control of the Lord is everywhere, and if the Lord is pleased, every part of nature will be pleased. The river will flow profusely to fertilize the land, and the ocean will supply sufficient quantities of minerals, pearls, and jewels. The forest will supply sufficient wood, drugs, and vegetables, and the seasonal changes will effectively help produce fruits and flowers in profuse quantity. The artificial way of living, depending on the factories and tools, can render so called happiness only to a limited number of the cost of millions. Since the energy of the mass people is engaged in factory production, the natural products are being hampered, and for this, the mass is unhappy. Without being educated properly, the mass of people are following in the footsteps of the vested interest by exploiting natural reserves, and therefore there is acute competition between individual and nation. There is no control by the trained agent of the Lord. We must look into the defects of modern civilization by comparison here, and should follow in the footsteps of Maharaja Yudhishthir to cleanse man and wipe out anachronisms. Hare
Thank you
Krishna.
so much,
Thank
Mataji. Thank you. So this again extends that point of leading a life with whatever the nature has given to us is actually more than sufficient, because being passengers on this planet, we actually do not need to make permanent arrangements for anything for ourselves here or for our children as well. We are supposed to be here for 50, 70, 100, 200 years, and that's all. For these many years, whatever is required is actually already provided by the nature. So there is one verse in Ishopanishad. I think the first one itself is there. Where is it? Ishopanishad. Everything animate or inanimate. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjita magridha kasya svidhana. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. Very important point, owned by the Lord. Yeah? One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. But however, our approach is what? Everything is mine, and if it is not mine, I still want it. And precisely this becomes the reason for our dissatisfaction. Now, the point that is being clearly highlighted here is, if you have a king who is pious, who understands these religious principles very well, only then the praja, the people of the kingdom, can understand this, and only then they will be able to apply it. So the objective actually should be to ensure that if we cannot elect a person who is knowledgeable in this area, at least we can follow the scriptures which actually guide us in this manner. Today, maybe everybody in the political or business world is corrupt, the mind is corrupt, but at least our scriptures are perfect. We can follow what the scriptures are saying and practice the our dharma, our daily life in such a manner which will not go against the nature. We can live in harmony with the nature. On top of that one, we can achieve our spiritual aim as well, which is the primary purpose why we came down into this human life, or at least on this earth. Nadhayo vyad.
Prabhu,
हाँ प्रभु.
they paying tax quota of their these rivers and all. It means they are sufficient rainfalls and all these things.
Yeah.
That
So it's a
then there is a
metaphor.
word you, yeah.
Sorry. Please continue.
And then there is a word used.
Which one are you referring to?
I marked it. Ideology of godly communism. What
ideology. So the communists, what they think, there is no God. Yeah. So communist philosophy is at a very, very basic level. It's that everybody should get everything equally, which is nice. But to say that God doesn't exist and whoever is getting it, it is because the communists have given it, that is the foolishness over there. So in Russia, the communism, one of the factors why communism spread was the communists used to go, communists do not believe in existence of God. They believe, or they used to go and spread communism in the manner saying that they used to go to the poor people who do not have anything, then they used to give the bread and ask them, who has given the bread to you? So then people would say, yes, you have given it. So that means it is not God who has given it. So then they used to say, I know not God, you have given it. And then they used to preach them saying that God doesn't exist. How can he give you? I exist, I am giving it to you. And then that is how people started getting brainwashed into believing that God doesn't exist. And that's how the communism spread. They're fundamental that everybody should have everything in an equal manner is nice, but the purpose or the process is incorrect. That's why Prabhupada writes here, godly communism is better than this kind of communism.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. We'll go to text 6. नाधयो व्याधयः क्लेशा दैवभूतात्महेतवः अजातशत्रावभवन् जन्तूनां राज्ञी कर्हिचित्.
Because of because of the kings having no enemy, the living beings were not at any time disturbed by mental agonies, diseases, or excessive heat or cold. To be non-violent to human beings and to be a killer or enemy of the poor animals is Satan's philosophy. In this age, there is enmity towards poor animals, and therefore the poor creatures are always anxious. The reaction of the poor animals is being forced on human society, and therefore there is always the strain of cold and or hot war between men individually, collectively, or nationally. At the time of Maharaj Yudhishthir, there were no different nations, although there were different subordinate states. The whole world was united, and the supreme head, being a trained king like Yudhishthir, kept all the inhabitants free from anxiety, diseases, and excessive heat and cold. There were not they were not only economically well to do, but also physically fit and undisturbed by the supernatural power, by enmity from other living beings, and by disturbance of bodily and mental agonies. There is a proverb in Bengali that a bad king spoils the kingdom and a bad housewife spoils the family. The truth is applicable here also, because the king was pious and obedient to the Lord and sages, because he was no one's enemy, and because he was a recognized agent of the Lord and therefore protected by him. Therefore, protected by him, all the citizens under the king's protection were, so to speak, directly protected by the Lord and his authorized agents. Unless one is pious and recognized by the Lord, he cannot make others happy who are under his care. There is a full cooperation between man and God and man and nature, and this conscious cooperation between man and God and man and nature, as exemplified by King Yudhishthir, can bring about happiness, peace, and prosperity in the world. The attitude of exploiting one another, the custom of the day, will only bring misery.
So in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 5, verse number 18, anybody remembers? It talks about seeing others at everybody at an equal level. Yeah? विद्या विनय संपन्ने ब्राह्मणे कवि हस्तिनी शुनि चैव स्वपाके च पंडिता समदर्शिनः. The humble sages by virtue of true knowledge, a very important point, see with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahman, a cow, a elephant, a dog, and a dog eater, an outcast. So all two or three types of entities have been taken. Animals have been taken. Animal of Rajogun, Tamogun, Satvogun has been taken. A Brahman, a knowledgeable person, and a Chandal, a least knowledgeable person, both have been taken. And the point is, a humble sage, okay, a Pandit, is able to see all of them equally. Why? Because he has true knowledge. The true knowledge is that there is a Paramatma in the heart of each and every living entity, and the soul, individual souls exist in the body of all of these people. So the soul is impure, the soul is completely pure, and these are the bodies that they have taken over. Now, when this philosophy is not known to people, then such a person distinguishes between a human being and an animal. And then the cause of that animal being present or being existing for my satisfaction, these thoughts start coming up, which is what Prabhupada highlights here as Satan's philosophy. That Satan distinguishes between a human being and a animal, and that is where the problems start happening. So the karma performed by killing the animals will come in some or the other way back to us, and that will give us some or the other bad result. And in some cases, when the mass killing of animals happen, like we see that poultry, around hundreds and thousands of chicken are killed every day. Imagine the quantity of chicken meat or something else being eaten. I don't know the statistics, but when so many animals are being killed on a daily basis, you can imagine that it's just a matter of time that these reactions will come back to the respective human beings. Okay. These purports are a bit long. We may not be able to finish the next four verses today, but
Prabhu, you are all looking not well also.
yeah, Prabhu, a little bit of cough and cold is there.
So I think we can close then.
One moment. Okay, the next purports are small ones. I think we can do it. The purports are small now. Ushitva hastina pure masan katipayan harihi surudham cha vishokaya swashushushcha priya kamyaya. Translation.
I'm reading, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Sri Hari, Lord Sri Krishna, resided at Hastinapur for a few months to pacify his relatives. I'm not able to see the line, Prabhu.
And
Can you
please his
repeat a little?
own sister Subhadra.
Oh, thank you, Prabhu. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Krishna was to start from Dwarka, his own kingdom, and after the battle of Kurukshetra and Yudhishthir's being enthroned, but to oblige the request of Maharaj Yudhishthir and to show special mercy to Bhishma Dev, Lord Krishna stopped at Hastinapur, the capital of Pandavas. The Lord decided to stay especially to pacify the aggressive kings as well as to please Subhadra, sister of the Lord Shri Krishna. Subhadra was especially to be pacified because she lost her only son Abhimanyu, who was just married. The boy left his wife Uttara, mother of Maharaj Parikshit. The Lord is always pleased to satisfy his devotees in any capacity. Only his devotees can play the part of his relatives. The Lord is absolute. Thank you. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. So thank you. So now this start talking about the journey of the Lord towards Dwarka and why he stayed back in Hastinapur. And even after staying back in Hastinapur for a few months, you will see that when he is actually about to leave, Yudhishthir again requests the Lord to stay back for some more time. Again, the Lord stays back for 1 or 2 months or 3 months, something like that. And meaning they're so much into love with the Lord that they do not want him to go at all. And The objective behind this one was to basically develop a kind of a, the exchange of love between himself and the Pandavas, Kunti and Uttara and everybody, as well as Subhadra. And uh, he has finished all his activities on the earth. It is just a kind of a wrap up scenario that is going on now. Let's move on. आमंत्र चाभ्य नुज्ञातः परिष्वज्याभिवाद्यतम् आरुरोह रथम कैश्चित् परिष्वक्तो अभिवादितः. Translation and purport.
Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah, Shri.
Afterwards, when the Lord asked permission to depart and the king gave it, the Lord offered his respects to Maharaj Yudhishthir by bowing down at his feet, and the king embraced him. After this, the Lord, being embraced by others, on receiving their obeisances, got into his chariot. Maharaj Yudhishthir was the elder cousin of Lord Krishna, and therefore, while departing from him, the Lord bowed down at the king's feet. The king embraced him as a younger brother, although the king knew perfectly well that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. The Lord takes pleasure when some of his devotees accept him as less important in terms of love. No one is greater than or equal to the Lord, but he takes pleasure in being treated as younger than his devotees. These are all transcendental pastimes of the Lord. The impersonalist cannot enter into the supernatural roles played by the devotee of the Lord. Thereafter, Bhim and Arjun embraced the Lord because they were of the same age, but Nakul and Sahadev bowed down before the Lord because they were younger than he.
So we can see, despite speaking Bhagavad Gita, despite confirming that he is the supreme Lord, despite saying Aham Sarvasya Prabho Matta Sarvam Pravardate, I am the creator of the material and spiritual worlds, despite saying in 14.4 Sarva Yonishu Kaunteya Murtaya Sambhavantiyaha Tasam Brahma Mahadyonir Aham Bija Pradha Pita, I am the seed giving father of each and every living being. Despite this, the Lord bows down at Yudhishthir's feet. You can imagine the greatness of the Lord. And despite bowing down to Yudhishthir and despite bowing down to Kunti Maharani and everybody, he is still Achyut. He is still infallible. He does not fall from his position. He still remains the Supreme Lord. You can imagine the greatness. Imagine something like this being done by a demigod. Can you imagine Lord Indra coming down and bowing in front of and touching down Yudhishthir's feet? Imagine the pride that Indra has for himself about his position will never let him do that. The Lord does not have pride. That's why Prabhupada writes it's all transcendental pastimes. Transcendental meaning those activities or by which he has transcended beyond the material world. And ego is part of the material world. He is beyond the material world. He does not have any ego. So he does not mind bowing down to Yudhishthir. That's the greatness. The last two verses, let's look at it.
Prabhu,
Hare
sorry,
Krishna.
I have a question.
Ah.
Over here, Krishna did bow down before Yudhishthir Maharaj, but for the Rajasuya Yajna, Yudhishthir washed Krishna's feet. So why is there a difference between these two pastimes?
The role of both of them was different. So the law, the Yudhishthir, because he was the host, he is supposed to treat everybody as a guest and worship them and give them their due, credit. And then there is something called as the first honor of being worshipped, which was the cause of Shishupal's anger. So he was saying that this guy is not even a king. You have called various Kshatriyas here, and you are not giving any importance to us, but you are giving this importance to this cowherd boy. How is it right? So that actually angered Shishupal. But the point was the Lord is the supreme. Yudhishthir had very well understood, Bhishma had understood, and Yudhishthir had asked all of them, Bhishma, Dronacharya, and Vidur also, that whom should I worship the first one? That first honor, the first worship is very prestigious. And because Lord Krishna was unanimously selected by all of them to be worshipped as the first person, that's why the role of Lord Krishna was above everybody. And that's why, as part of the worship, Yudhishthir touched the Lord's feet, cleaned it, and did the complete worship. Whereas here, the role again got changed. The Lord is behaving like a younger brother of Yudhishthir, and a younger brother always bows down and touches the feet of the elder brother. And that's why the Lord is touching his feet now. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So verses 9 and 10. सुभद्रा द्रौपदी कुंती विराट तनया तथा गांधारी धृतराष्ट्रश्च युयुत्सु युयुत्सुर्गौतमो यमौ वृकोदरश्च धौम्यश्च स्त्रियो मत्स्य सुतादयः न सेहिरे विमुह्यन्तो विरहं शार्ङ्गधन्वः. Translation and purport. Who's reading?
I'm reading Prabhu.
Yeah.
Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Right.
At that time, Subhadra, Draupadi, Kunti, Uttara, Gandhari, Dhritarashtra, Yuyutsu, Kripacharya, Nakula, Sahadeva, Bhimasena, Dhaumya, and Satyavati all nearly fainted because it was impossible for them to bear separation from Lord Krishna. Purport. Lord Sri Krishna is so attractive for the living beings, especially for the devotees, that it is impossible for them to tolerate separation. The conditioned soul under the spell of illusory energy forgets the Lord, otherwise, he cannot. The feeling of such separation cannot be described, but it can simply be imagined by devotees only. After his separation from Vrindavana and the innocent rural cohort, boys, girls, ladies, and others, they all felt shocked throughout their lives. And the separation of Radharani, the most beloved cohort girl, is beyond expression. Once they met at Kurukshetra during a solar eclipse, and the feeling which was expressed by them is heartrending. There is, of course, a difference in the qualities of the transcendental devotees of the Lord, but none of them who have ever contacted the Lord by direct communion or otherwise can leave him for a moment. That is the attitude of the pure devotee.
Jai, thank you. So now this basically talks about how others felt the separation or the thought of separation, that the Lord is departing here. So we can see the people like Gandhari and Dhritarashtra are also mentioned here. Yeah. So Gandhari was the one who cursed the Lord, but Gandhari is the one who still feels separation from the Lord. Dhritarashtra never accepted that Krishna is Lord, but still he feels separation for him. And these are the two people whose 100 children were killed because the war happened. And one of the prominent factors which contributed to the war from happening was Krishna. So despite that, they are feeling separation. And we understand this very easily because in Garga Samhita, before Lord Krishna advented, he assigned the roles to all individuals who should become who and take birth on earth. That Krishna had assigned these roles to everybody at that time itself. And Gandhari and Dhritarashtra were also given their roles. Similarly, Duryodhan also was given a role. So Kali, Duryodhan is a portion of Kali. So Kali as a person, his partial incarnation is Duryodhan. And he was given. So Kali is actually not an enemy of the Lord. Kali is a servant of the Lord, carrying out the orders of the Lord to drive away the people from the Lord. make them commit more and more sins, so that the going back to the Lord process is expedited. It's a deeper concept we will touch upon later. But all of these people, they are some or the other, they have performed some or the other role for the Lord previously. And that is why I think in the previous verse it is mentioned, right? Or this verse. Yeah, only his devotees can play the part of his relatives. Because when we are with the Lord, to expect that everything will go physically and materially very smooth is not a correct expectation. Only the relatives, only the devotees of the Lord can actually sustain the troubles of being with the Lord, sustaining the troubleships, and still continue to worship the Lord. People like you and me will find it very difficult. That's why people like Arjun and Yudhishthir are able to tolerate, because they are constantly remembering the Lord. Hare Krishna. So we can meet in the next week. Any question to be answered?
Next week, Prabhu, just tell that story that once Radharani met Krishna in his solar eclipse at Kurukshetra. What is this?
हाँ प्रभु, स्टोरी टेलिंग के लिए ना अपने जय गोविंद प्रभु एंड राधापाद पंकज प्रभु आर एक्सेलेंट. आई एम अ बिट वीक इन दैट. So
Okay.
just remind him. Next week it is Jai Govind Prabhu only who will talk about it. You will take the class. So just remind him about this one. I will also write to him. Okay, Hare Krishna. See you all next week.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.